I will give you a lecture titled Income Inequality, Myths and Truths. What I will try to do is to challenge Piketty perspective, but in particular I will try to convince you that you have to be very careful when reading the kind of statistics and elaborations that economists in general, not only Piketty, do, because they are very tricky and they suffer of the ideological prejudice of the economist himself, and they need to be interpreted. So this will be the message that I want you to bring home. Of course, as it was mentioned, I come from a free market ideological background. I'm not neutral, and therefore my vision will be influenced by this ideological background. Piketty is a Marxist, and therefore his perspective and what he writes is influenced by the fact that he's a Marxist. I always say to my students, there are no neutral lecturer. If a lecturer is neutral, there are only two options. Or he's ignorant, that it means he doesn't have an opinion on what he's talking about, or he's in a bad faith, he's trying to bully you and use his dominant position. So I always try to be honest and to declare my faith before I start talking, so you know what kind of expectations to have about this, and eventually to develop a critical perspective on that. So the very clear message that I want to give you is that data are not gospel truths. Okay, unluckily, mainstream economics make a massive use of data, but what is missing is information about how data are actually collected and statistics built. And therefore, what I call you to do is to implement interpretative processes about data. So data are there, statistics are there, graphs are there, but what these data are trying us to tell? What are they trying to tell us? I give you a very fast and simple example. I had occasion in the past to travel extensively to China, also in the northern region, on the border with North Korea and Mongolia. There are beautiful highways in China and in the north, but there are no cars. So, if we look at the statistics itself, the implementation of new highways in China will bring up the GDP, because one of the positive elements of GDP is government spending. Therefore, new highways are bringing the statistics about the GDP up. But who is going to pay for this highway now or in the future, if nobody is paying with a ticket, because there are no cars in these regions? So we can look at the data and the macro data, but there is always a micro reality behind the data that needs to be approached. And so a positive statistics about GDP is not necessarily a good thing. We have to see how this data was built, which are the elements that contributed to the GDP growth. Is it clear? This is what is called hermeneutical process. Okay? And to come to the complex reality that we have to analyze today, I have to say that discussions about income inequality usually focus on income distribution. How much part of the cake goes to the rich, and how much of the cake goes to the poor. But what about income production and its amount? Income distribution is an incomplete information if we don't understand how income, how wealth is created, and how much is the amount of this income. I give you a very simple example. Let's take country number 1, in which there is no income inequality. The total income of this country is 1,000. There are 10 people, and everybody gets 100. there is no income inequality. It's a very egalitarian country, an egalitarian society. Let's take instead a very unequal country, country number 2, with a total income of 10,000, a population of 10, where citizen 1 gets 5,000, citizen 2 gets 3,000, and all the rest, all the other 8 citizens get 250 each. So, summing up citizen 1 and 2, we get 80% of the cake, while the other 8 people, the rest of the 80% of the population will get only 20%. So this is a very unequal country, a very unequal society. But where would you like to live? In an equal country in which you get 100, or in an unequal country in which you get 150? The answer to you. So you prefer to live in a country where there is the highest number of rich people, you get a smaller percentage of the cake, but the cake is much bigger and therefore even a smaller percentage is better for you, or you prefer to live in a poor country, getting a fair share of the income but a low share? The answer goes to you. So income inequality in general doesn't tell us the full story. There is, to be stressed, the importance of a serious approach to data. So before looking at how the cake is distributed, we should look at the cake size. With a bigger cake, there are more chances of growth for everybody. So how to increase the cake? This is something that we will see later in the presentation. Coming to the article that your lecturer gave you to read by Piketty and Science, in general, the claim that they do is that capitalistic development favor the richest part of the population, creating inequality. So, if we look at the graph, of course, we can see that in particular, after the 1960s, there was a growing share of the cake in US and Europe going to the people who are already rich, and therefore income inequality was growing. But we should look also at the years, okay? Look at when we observe a lower inequality. Look at the graph. In these years, we have a constantly decreasing share of income going to the rich people, okay? But you didn't study history, so you don't know what happened probably in these years. These are the years that go from the big depression, the Great Depression in 1929, up to the end of World War II in 1945. So, of course, inequality was going down in these years. Everybody was much poorer. So, everybody was more equal, but in the sense that everybody was losing. I don't think that these were great years in which to live. Nor the Great Depression, nor World War II, for sure. So everybody was getting poorer. So we observe a higher level of equality, but toward the lower level of income. Because everybody was losing. And the government was focused in producing tanks and machine guns instead of producing bread and cheese. Correct? So, again, the lesson is, look deeper into the data. You cannot simply look at the curve. Look at what we have here. What was going on here? Then we have another difficult period here. We are closer to the 70s oil shock. Another period of economic difficulties. So another period in which everybody was getting poorer. So what we observe is that actually there are periods in which inequality is shrinking, but these are not good economic periods. A period in which everybody is equally suffering. So the Piketty, we have to pronounce with a French accent, so it is Piketty, seriously. Piketty and C claim is that growing income inequality is brought in by capitalistic development and globalization because of the higher level of accumulation of capital. Actually, like Piketty, my latest book is on capital theory, and I even contest the idea that something like a rate of return on capital can be measured, can actually exist. So I'm even against the technical idea of return on capital. But Piketty and C claim that with more government intervention, we can regulate the accumulation of capital and therefore getting a better society for everybody. But is this whole story true? And is free market actually so dirty as all the egalitarian people usually try to convince us? Let's take a look to another set of data. You are familiar with the Gini coefficient? Yes, no? Okay, we don't talk about it now, but in general it's an index developed by a country fellow of mine to measure inequality. A higher Gini coefficient connotes greater inequality up to a maximum of 1. Okay, so from 0 to 1. The highest the number, the highest inequality. If we look at the glorious period of globalization, going from 1988 to 2011, we see the Gini index globally, worldwide, shrinking from 0.69 to 0.63. So in this period, actually, we had a higher level of equality, a lesser degree of inequality in general. The global middle expanded as real income went up between 70 and 80% for those around the world who were already earning at or near the global median. So the people in the middle level of income saw during this year the income growing on an average of 70 and 80%. Those in the bottom third of the global income distribution register real income gains between 40 and 70%. So in general, the situation went not too bad for them. And during the same period, the share of world populations living on $1.25 or less, that is what the World Bank defines as absolute poverty, fell from 44 to 23%. So the past 3 decades were indeed glorious decades regarding the fight to poverty. Of course, we haven't solved this problem, okay? It's a difficult issue, but in general, people are much richer now than 30 years ago, okay? In general, and the people that benefit more are the people in the bottom, as we will see, and in the middle income level. Here we have a very nice graph showing the number of people living in extreme poverty and the number of people not in extreme poverty between 1820 and today, so the past 200 years. Look here. If we want to claim that the so-called capitalistic era is bad for the poor, look at this graph. 200 years ago, this was the share of population living in absolute poverty, and this was the share of population not in absolute poverty. So as you can see, there was a big imbalance between poor and rich. As capitalistic development spread around the world, we had not only a huge increase in the total amount of population, but a constant decrease in the number of people living in absolute poverty, and a very big number of people living not in absolute poverty.
Is there a difference between extreme poverty, or just normal poverty?
Yeah, of course. We can, it's pretty arbitrary actually. We can define different levels that we can label as extreme absolute poverty or middle poverty or income. But here I use the data from the World Bank, which defines the people living in absolute poverty as the one earning less than $1.25 a day. So here we have the first series of data showing that capitalistic development was probably not so bad for the poor. So as I mentioned, in 1820, the vast majority of people lived in extreme poverty, and only a tiny elite enjoyed higher standards of living. Economic growth over the last 200 years completely transformed our world. These data are impressive because in the last 200 years, population increased, the world population increased sevenfold. 7 times, okay? So, in order to feed this increasing amount of people, we needed to have an increase in productivity in general, a better economic system, a better way to do things. Otherwise, this graph would not be like this. It would show a higher number of people living in extreme poverty. How can technology and production face the need of a population running so fast? Capitalistic development proved to be probably an effective way to increase the general conditions of a higher share of the population. So, in a time of unprecedented population growth, we managed to lift more and more people out of poverty. The issue is what? The issue is, as I mentioned before, the cake. Okay? So, this was possible not because of government-led income redistribution, but because of an exceptional economic growth. So because of the way in which the cake grew in these last 200 years. When I say this, please don't take me wrong. I'm not telling you that we are living in heaven, that we are living in the wonderful world where there are no situations of bad treatment of workers, of poverty, of slavery, modern slavery. No, I'm not telling you this, okay? But what I'm trying to show you is that in general, generally speaking, conditions of the poor improved over the past 200 years. And we might say, I come from a background in economic history, that the world changed much more in the last 200 years than in the previous 2000. I would say that the situation of a worker in the 18th century was pretty similar to the situation of a worker at the time of Jesus or in the Middle Age. But what happened after the Industrial Revolution was something pretty astonishing. Here again we have data showing the same as before, but coming from different sources. All the curves show a sharp shrinking, a sharp decrease of the people living in absolute poverty in the last 200 years. Now, another claim that I want to fight is that economic freedom is bad for the poor, that free market is bad for the poor, so we need more and more government intervention in order to protect the poor. Probably the people in Venezuela in these days would not be so keen to ask for more government intervention. But leaving aside what's going on in Venezuela now, look at these statistics. Here we have the link between people living in poverty or extreme poverty and the index freedom. Okay, it is another statistical index measuring for each country political freedom and economic freedom according to several indicators. Okay, we can see that in the countries that score best in the index freedom, the level of extreme poverty and moderate poverty is quite different with what is happening in the countries that are scoring badly for the freedom index. So you can see that the people living in poverty, extreme or moderate, in the worst countries according to the freedom index is a total of almost 80%. Okay, while the poor people in the most free countries are less than 5%. Of course, we cannot take data ideologically. We don't have necessarily to conclude that freedom and economic development work together is for you to verify, but for sure these data are telling us something significant. We have a statistic that is telling us that in countries that are more free are also less poor. Okay? Do we believe this? Okay, this is a number. But for sure, there is something for us to test. Is really freedom good for general welfare? According to these numbers, yes. Evidently, these numbers are telling us something. Freedom, in a way, matters for general welfare. Okay? You can...
Sorry to interrupt. I kind of fell off the track. You said that free market and economic freedom is...
Can you... Sorry, I cannot hear.
You said that economic freedom is good for the population because more economic freedom, less poor people.
In general, this is index freedom that
yeah.
is not only measuring the level of economic freedom, but also political freedom.
Yeah. But you just said, I didn't understand that part, government intervention needed to protect the poor. I mean, in what circumstances does it happen?
No, my point was a question. It's really true that we need government intervention in order to improve the general condition of the population, or do we need more freedom? According to this data, freedom is better than government intervention. Because these data are, again, not considering only the level of free market, but also political freedom. Okay? And there are curious cases, in example, in this region, in which we have Singapore, which is a country that scored very well on economic freedom, but not so well on political freedom. But these are exceptional cases, usually referred to very small countries. In general, I would say that political freedom and economic freedom work together. On this you might read Hayek, that show, and Mises, that show how a certain level of government intervention with the progress of the time require more and more government intervention. That is what happened in the past decade in Venezuela. Now we cannot find toilet paper in the supermarket. This is true. You don't hear about this in the news, but you can look at blogs. So all the inequality rhetoric from Piketty and companies is based on the assumption that the cake does not grow, okay? And the rich is a growing portion of it. This is one of the main mistakes behind egalitarian reasoning. So the cake is not growing, the rich are getting richer, and therefore someone else is losing. Of course, the poor are losing if we assume that the cake is not growing. But reality and common sense show instead that the primary way to reduce inequality is to find a way to get the cake bigger. If the cake is growing, there is chance for everybody to get a bigger piece. It is not necessarily like that, but there is a higher chance. If the cake is not growing, it's not that we have to fight with each other. That is where all the class struggle discourse come from. If the cake is always the same, I'm against the others. I want to get a bigger share at the expenses of other people. But if the cake can grow and can grow fast, I don't need to fight for a bigger piece. I just can take a fair share related with my own skills and my own productivity. Because as we will see later, the second key factor is productivity. I don't know if later we will have time to look at data about Malaysia, but there was a recent debate about minimum wage. The people, some politicians are trying to claim that we have to increase that because the poor people are getting a too low income. But if we look at data, as we will see later, in the past 50 years, the people in Malaysia earning more than 2,000 ringgit a month moved from, I believe, 30% to 95%. This was without a regulation of minimum wage. Nobody in my office or in my company is getting a salary even close to the minimum wage. The one that is earning less is earning 6 times the minimum wage. Okay? This is because the government is forcing me to pay my people well? No, but because I recognize the contribution that people are giving to the company where I work. So I know that if I don't pay for their productivity, they will look for a better alternative somewhere else. So if people are actually giving an added value to the company, there is no reason for me to let them escape. Even I try to keep them. Okay. So this is the key to increase the income of the people. Get them to do the things better, which is called usually productivity. So how can we grow the cake and improve productivity? With more capitalism, for the moment I would drop this word. It's a word that I don't like and is a source of confusions. I prefer to compare government planning against free market. So these are the real alternatives to increase the cake and improve productivity. Government planning or free market. Government planning usually is oriented to income redistribution, which in very few words means taking money from someone to give money to someone else. We can call income redistribution, but we can also call it legalized theft in a way. So the first problem with government planning is a moral problem. According to which principle is government allowed to take honestly earned income from some people to give to others? So is redistribution a legalized theft? So there is a violation in a way of private property. So I go to work, I earn money, the government is telling me you are earning too much, I take something from you and I give to someone else. We can all agree on the idea to help the poor, but according to which principles is government doing this and deciding how much has to be taken out from me to be given to someone else? So, which are the principles behind government redistribution? Is a Robin Hood logic actually easy to apply? To take from the rich to give to the poor? And in which percentage? Who decides? According to which principle? Who would actually benefit? You realize that behind the redistribution there is a higher risk for corruption. We can say that, in example, government workers, people working in the public sector, can have a higher chance to get benefit from redistribution because they are a big cake of the voters, and they can be directly controlled by the government because they work for the government. So we can assume that in the government sector, in the public sector, there might be a sort of crony relationships between the workers and the government.
Are there any statistics on this about the corruption?
I don't know actually, and not sure about Malaysia, but logically speaking, you can think that of course there is a very high risk for corruption for this. I come from a country in which public sector is very strong, like in Malaysia. Around 35% of the population work for the government in a way through the local carrier, Alitalia, in the school, universities. Recent statistics show that we have a higher number of people cleaning the schools than police officers. We have very clean schools, but a little bit unsafe cities. Anyway, I could see, even without numbers, in the political discourse, that government always tries to benefit these people because they are the first source of votes. And I can see that it's true that in the government sector, most people vote for the left-leaning parties because these people are the ones with a higher logic of helping the public sector more and more. So there is this kind of political struggle that is part of the moral concern regarding income distribution. But the biggest problem for me is of a practical nature, not of moral. It is an argument that was developed by an Austrian economist called Ludwig von Mises in 1920, and is the knowledge information problem. What does it mean? What is information? We have a lot of information. We say that we are living in the information world nowadays, and by nature information is dispersed, tacit, ever-changing, and non-transmittable. What does this mean? That, in example, let's talk about individual preferences. You all have your individual preferences, right? I hope so, otherwise you would be robots. You like certain food, you like a different kind of partners, certain clothes, certain cars, and whatever, okay? But this information is dispersed in your minds, right? Government, hopefully, doesn't know all your preferences, right? Doesn't know what you really like, right? And this information is tacit. You don't go around with the flag with your preferences on that, right? So it's there in your mind, dispersed in individual minds, and kept into the mind. Communicated, how it is communicated. When you buy something, you are communicating preferences. So via the price system, when you go to buy an iPhone for 3,000 ringgit, more or less, you are telling to the the economic world, to Apple and to the other economic actors, that your preference for the iPhone is higher than the utility of 3,000 ringgit. So you prefer the enjoyment coming from the iPhone to keeping 3,000 ringgit in your pocket for the future. This is not good, not bad. It's a matter of preference. But you are telling this to the market only in the moment in which you buy the iPhone. If you are not buying the iPhone, you can give a higher number of signals. You are telling us that maybe you don't have 3,000 ringgit, so you would like to have that enjoyment, but you cannot afford it. Or that you are more future-oriented, that you want to buy a car and save money for a car. Or that you don't want simply to be bothered by other people, and therefore you will never have a handphone, a mobile phone. So, by non-buying, by non-purchasing something, you are communicating a very big set of information to the market. And it's part of the task of the entrepreneur to implement hermeneutical processes to try to understand why you didn't buy that iPhone. It's a matter of the Apple to understand why. Was it too expensive? Or the preferences of society are changing toward BlackBerry or Samsung or whatever. It's a complex process that is the task of business people. Okay? And moreover, preferences are ever changing. Because, you know, my generation at your age was purchasing Nokia, right? 3310 or something like that. Then all of a sudden, there were no more Nokia in the market. Because people start to like the Samsung, the BlackBerry, first was the BlackBerry, Samsung, iPhone, and whatever. Okay, so there is a time framework which changes everything. Okay, and the only instrument that we have in hand to figure out something about what's happening in terms of preference is the price mechanism. Is with the choice to buy or not to buy something at a certain price that we are eventually communicating something. So the price mechanism is the best tool we have in hand for information transmission. You never thought about this about prices, right? By buying something, you are telling or not telling a lot of things that need to be interpreted. And the task of business people and eventually economists is to understand what you are trying to say. So, why I gave you this big speech about information, prices, preferences, etc., etc. Because if government or any central authority or any single mind, because when we talk about government, in the end we are talking about people, we are not talking about the machine, right? So any single mind or group of minds that would have to implement a plan regarding the economic system, including the redistribution of wealth plan via taxation, in example, would need a quantity of information regarding individual preferences that is impossible to master and is impossible to gather before mastering it, because this information is tacit, dispersed, and ever-changing. Even if we admit that in a certain magic moment the government could possess all the necessary information to implement a rational plan, in the same moment in which this plan is implemented, this information is no more valid, because something is happening in your mind that makes that content of information already lama, old. Sudah lama, habis. Tak boleh kerja. Correct or not? And this is why, according in particular to these three economists, Mises, Hayek, and Lavoie, central planning cannot work. even if we agree with the intentions, okay, we agree because we are good people that government should do something for the poor, should intervene in the economy, whatever the government will try to do, even if we don't think about the moral concern, will not practically work. Cannot simply work. Is time to fail, and therefore has to be dropped. Is it clear? So, according to this reasoning, we can actually go against the belief, the Piketty beliefs, that a single person or entity can eventually own everything because of free market capitalism. That is the situation, the extreme situation, when the rate of return on capital is superior to economic growth. I remind you that I don't believe that something like a rate of return on capital can be actually measured. But anyway, why the Piketty situations cannot exist in the free market system? Because a situation in which one big cartel or one individual person is actually owning everything would be no more free market. It would be socialism. So can indeed free market lead to a situation of socialism in which someone is owing everything? Can? You think so? Unluckily, this cannot happen in the free market, unluckily for your colleague, because of the limits of calculability in the market. And we come back to what I just mentioned before. The necessary base for a company to survive in the market is to be able to compare profit and losses, to compare cost and revenues. So if I'm having a profit, which means if my revenues are higher than my costs, I can survive in the market. Otherwise, I will have to find a way or to do something else or to shut down anyway to change my plan. Is correct? This is possible to do in the present economic system because we compare revenues and costs with the same unit of measure, which are prices, right? Expressed in ringgit Malaysia, US dollar, euros, whatever currency, right? But prices are an objective synthesis of subjectivist evaluations, measuring the preferences, as we mentioned before. A situation in which someone is owing everything is unsustainable in the market because would drop the condition to measure costs and revenues. Because if you are owing everything, in a way you are kicking out of the market other participants, and therefore you cannot gather the necessary information in order to interpret properly costs and revenues. So if you lose the objectivities of costs and revenues, you cannot calculate if you are profiting or losing in the market, and therefore you are like a socialist calculator, like a dictator, or like the government in the Soviet Union, and therefore your economic calculation is no more rational. Therefore the free market poses a very strict limit to the possibility for a company to grow beyond a certain level. This limit is given by the rational calculation. We need to be able to calculate if we are losing or profiting. If we lose the price system, then we are no more rational. Indeed, if you look at the reality of big cartels, big corporations, and the advantage of these companies, you will find out that usually these big size and big advantages are not a consequence of free market. Rather, they are a consequence of collusion with politics and government. usually companies grow beyond a certain level because they are protected by the government, not because they are competing in the market. And therefore, certain cartels are the consequence of political collusion, not of free interaction in the market. It is what is called crony capitalism. And free market economy, free market capitalism is not the same as crony capitalism. Crony capitalism come out of political collusion. How much more time do I have?
Till they start falling asleep. They look good.
They still look good? 10 minutes, 15 minutes,
Sure.
3 hours, 4 hours? 15 minutes, okay.
Yeah.
Another important point, I will not quote Bastiat, but I think later this presentation will be shared with the students, right? So you can read about Bastiat. But an important point still regarding the size of companies and the possibility for them to grow is the following one. The wealthy people, the entrepreneurs, are not necessarily free to spend money which the consumers are not prepared to refund to them in paying more for the product. So, entrepreneurs, in a way, all these bad people that according to Piketty are ruining the life of the poor, in the end, depends on the rest of the population. You cannot grow as a company in your size, in your rate of accumulation, in your profit, if people are not buying your product. So there is a central role for the consumers in deciding where the wealth is going, that make the consumers king in the market. And therefore, the best defense system against exploitation or against corporation or whatever is given by you. You are deciding the market. I do a certain product, but if nobody buys, there is no way in which I can become rich. Okay? So, or you consider yourself so stupid that you cannot control your consumption habits, or you must raise the consideration of yourself and say, we consider stupid to spend 3,000 ringgit for an iPhone, whatever, but it's your choice. I can be with Bill Gates, okay? The one that died.
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. I don't understand anything about technology. I think you realize this. So I could be Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or whatever, but if nobody buys my product, I will never reach that level. So who made Apple big is not Steve Jobs, is ultimately you. How many of you have an iPhone? Yeah, I see an apple there on the top. There's 2 apples there on the top. How many iPhones?
Samsung.
Samsung, I have a BlackBerry. And here there is another apple. So you can see, in the end, it's not Steve Jobs making himself rich. You are making Steve Jobs rich. So if you believe that Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or whatever is exploiting you, making you them consumers, slave of technology, you are underestimating yourself. Because you consider yourself so stupid that you cannot discriminate in the market what is good for you and what is not good. Correct? So have a little bit of self-consideration and raise yourself to the role of decision makers in the market. In the end, without consumers, there are no rich people, there are no rich companies. Right? Do you understand this? This is crucial. So you are the ones to decide who to price in the market and who to punish. You can say people are buying more telephones than books. Who is the people? So our society is made of stupid people because people buy phones and don't buy books. Okay, this is one of the arguments of the left. Okay, but who are the people? You are the people. So it's not in general, people are not buying the books. Who is not buying the books? You are not buying the books. So if you think that buying books is better than buying iPhone, go and buy books. Don't complain because the others are not doing the same. Right? So, entrepreneurship in this sense is a key feature of human action, but not only from the business people's side, also from your side. Every time you are going to buy something, you are doing an entrepreneurial act, because you are deciding what is good to satisfy your needs, to implement your plan. If you bring out your girlfriend or a girl that you are dating for eating nasi ayam instead of going to watch a nice movie, this is an entrepreneurial choice. Your final site is to get engaged with this lady, to put it nicely. Then you decide if it's a better strategy to pay for nasi ayam or for a movie. You can discover later on that you were wrong. But this is entrepreneurship. Okay? And is entrepreneurship that decide actually how income is redistributed, and why entrepreneurship works better in a free market. Because of what we discussed until now about the problem of communication and information, about the discovery of opportunities. Let's say if you can choose between Nasi Lemak and a movie, you still can see if your strategy was appropriate or not. But if you have no choice, you only have nasi ayam, then there is not much entrepreneurship that can be exercised, because you have no choice. Because maybe someone is telling you that you can do only a certain thing. Okay. So the free market is superior to government intervention. I'm not telling you it's perfect. Nothing among human things is perfect. Forget about perfection. But it's better than government intervention because of the higher degree of plan coordination which is allowed by it, which means higher efficiency, productivity. What do I mean by this? Is in a realm of freedom, the exchange of the information, the knowledge that is stuck in your mind can actually happen and can be communicated via what you buy and you don't buy. So if at a certain point nobody is buying Apple products, Steve Jobs or the people that are surviving him will have to decide to do something else, and therefore put their entrepreneurship at work to find a way to preserve their wealth status. If there is no freedom, let's say you can buy only Satu Malaysia mobile phones produced by the government, then there are no information that you are exchanging about your preferences. So there is no income distribution that can actually happen. You cannot decide who to make rich and who to leave poor, because your decisions and your preferences are decided by someone else. That's what happened, in example, in USSR, or what is happening in Venezuela. Okay, what happened in Cambodia or in North Korea. So this is the only way in which a system of productivity can be implemented, because you are free to put your knowledge into something through your choices and your entrepreneurial decisions, broadly speaking. If you were told by the government which job to do or which school to go, there would be no choice for you to improve your productivity. Someone else is deciding for you. Why I stress so much on productivity? Because this is the only way to make the cake bigger. Increase productivity. If people would do the same thing with the same technology, there would be no increase in productivity. And that's why for several millennia we didn't have a big increase in population or in technology or in wealth like in the last 200 years. In the last 200 years, but of course that was not all at sudden, but was the process of something that started to happen much earlier, there was such a big jump in technology that the cake could indeed grow so much and be able to face a sevenfold increase in the population. And this is possible, or is more possible, when the government intervention is limited, because of the reasons that we mentioned before about the information problem. So the basic lessons is that incentive matter, okay, and redistribution is a negative incentive. It reduces entrepreneurial incentive. Okay. If someone, in example, in my country, the average fiscal pressure is around 70%. 70%. Fiscal pressure, the fiscal burden on corporate, on company, 70%. You understand that if you are a person, you rather leave the country instead of giving 7 hours out of 10 of your work to the government. There is no incentive. And that's why my country is becoming more and more a poor country, and that's why, in fact, I left it. Why do you think I'm here? I'm here because here I earn much more money than what I would earn in my own country, around 10 times. So if you think that the West is best, now the situation is changing. So this is a very strong example to show how the government intervention is a way to make to reduce the possibility for making the cake bigger. Now, here there are a lot of tables that regarding the Malaysian case, which I cannot go through, but only few words about the Malaysian case. This is the Gini coefficient in the last 25 years in Malaysia. And you can see, this shows you that inequality indeed in Malaysia fell down. The Gini index, the Gini coefficient is shrinking down. And in particular, it fell down sharply between 2000 and 2007, and then again after 2009. The years between 2007 and 2009 are the peak years of the Great Recession. Okay, so again, bad years for everybody. Instead, the years of growth are years of an increasing openness of Malaysia toward globalization and free market. And this is another very, very important graph about Malaysia, in which you can see that not only Malaysia is getting richer, but the poor are growing their condition at a faster pace. Look at the last 2 years. The richest people show their income to grow 8.5%. The middle people, 11.3%, and the bottom people, 17.2%. And this was the same. Okay, these are the years of the financial, including also the financial crisis. But in general, you can see that in the past 20 years, the income gain of the bottom 40% in Malaysia was higher than the gain of the top 20%. In terms of percentage, of course. So this showed that the age of globalization brought a sharper increase in income. The income increase from the bottom 40% and the middle 40% was faster than for the top 20%, which means that growing freedom brings a growing cake and a growing portion for the less rich or for the poor. So increase freedom, you increase the income condition of the poor people. Thank you.